Have you ever felt that nagging sense of just, that nothing's overtly wrong, but you're kind of unmotivated, listless, just
Oh,
drifting?
definitely. That's a really common feeling.
Yeah, and it reminds me of that term in Chinese culture, lying flat. Well, today we're taking a deep dive into exactly this sensation. We're using Corey Keyes' 2024 book, Languishing, How to Reclaim a Sense of Vitality in a World That Makes Us Tired.
Right. And Keyes is a sociology professor over at Emory University. His work gives us a really solid way to understand this feeling.
So let's start with the term itself, languishing. Adam Grant really popularized it during the pandemic, didn't he?
He did, yeah. And it perfectly captures that state. It's somewhere between mental health and mental illness. You're not clinically depressed, but you're definitely far from thriving.
Okay.
It's this general sense of being unwell, kind of sluggish, passive, not really interested in much, and just lacking motivation.
So what does that actually feel like day to day, like a gray filter over everything?
That's a good way to put it. Yeah. Nothing sparks joy. You feel like there's no meaning. And even small tasks can feel overwhelming.
Keyes lists some specific symptoms, right?
He does. Things like a disinterest in your surroundings, feeling like nothing really matters deep
No
down.
passion for work, maybe?
Exactly. Or feeling like your environment is just out of control, this constant unease.
And getting really irritable over tiny things.
Yeah, surprisingly irritable over minor setbacks. Socializing feels like a huge effort.
A chore, basically.
Right. And then there's that sharp drop in self-worth, maybe losing ambition, passion, ideals, just generally low mood overall.
You mentioned lying flat earlier. How does Keyes see that fitting in? Is it the same thing?
Well, he notes that lying flat can sometimes be an active choice, like deciding to opt out of the rat race.
Okay.
But Keyes argues if that choice leads you to lose interest in work and, crucially, social connection, then it's not really sustainable. It'll likely slide into full-blown languishing.
Interesting. And this isn't just some new feeling tied to the pandemic, is it? There's history here.
Oh, absolutely. There's an older, maybe more advanced English term, acedia,
Acedia.
from Greek, right? Yeah, akudia.
Yeah.
It means a lack of care for life and even for yourself. It was actually once considered the 8th deadly sin.
Eighth. Wow. So distinct from sloth.
Very distinct. Sloth is more about laziness, but acedia means you don't even care enough about yourself to bother doing anything. It's a profound indifference.
Got it. So it's important then to differentiate languishing from, say, depression or burnout. How do they differ?
Right, crucial distinction. Depression is much more severe. We're talking persistent despair or sadness, often for weeks, maybe serious sleep issues, even suicidal thoughts. Languishing isn't that extreme.
Okay, not that deep pit. And burnout.
Burnout is usually tied specifically to work. It comes from chronic stress, like when your workload massively outweighs your resources.
And burnout can sometimes be fixed with rest or changing jobs, maybe.
Often, yeah. Rest or a change of environment can make a big difference with burnout. Languishing is usually more pervasive.
But they're not totally separate, are they? There's a relationship there.
Definitely. And this is where it gets really interesting and maybe a bit worrying. Burnout can lead to languishing. That chronic work stress can spill over.
Okay, so burnout first.
Potentially, yeah. And then, if languishing isn't addressed, it can develop into full-blown depression. There's a pathway there.
So languishing is kind of a dangerous middle ground. What are the other risks?
Well, the dangers go beyond just your mood. Languishing increases the risk for things like PTSD
Okay.
and other issues too. For students, you might see increases in smoking, drinking, self-harm, or even suicidal thoughts. They might withdraw from school.
And for adults,
Disinterest in work, naturally, but also anxiety, lower efficiency, and, interestingly, more frequent visits to the doctor.
physically, how does that work?
Keyes talks about something called the conserved transcriptional response to adversity, CTRA genes. Basically, your body's stress response goes haywire.
That sounds bad.
It is. It leads to more inflammation, weakened immunity. It actually impacts your physical health and can even contribute to premature death.
Wow. So this isn't just feeling meh. It's genuinely unhealthy.
Exactly. It's a dangerous state to be in long term.
And you said it's common. Just how common are we talking?
Incredibly common. Keyes' research on prevalence really hammers this home.
Which groups are most affected?
The most susceptible age groups seem to be adolescents, so 12 to 19-year-olds.
Okay.
Young adults, maybe 25 to 34, and then older adults, 75 plus. In these groups, it can affect 50 to 60% of people.
50 to 60%, that's staggering.
Yeah.
But it's not just them.
No, other age groups aren't immune at all. It really feels like a state of languishing at every turn.
Even young kids.
Surprisingly, yes, ages 1 to 5. About 37% show symptoms like struggling to bounce back from sadness, not showing affection easily, or lacking curiosity, often linked to unstable home environments or economic hardship.
And teenagers. You said 60%.
Up to 60% in high school, yeah. And interestingly, it's often not just about money. Sometimes it's middle or upper class families where there's economic stability, but maybe parental neglect, lack of emotional care, or just not respecting the kids' opinions. That creates deep insecurity when they're trying to figure out who they are.
College students, too.
Oh, definitely. You've got high self-expectations, intense competition, parental pressure, plus all the anxiety about entering the workforce. It's like a string stretched too tight.
And working adults, what's the trigger there?
Often a sense of helplessness. The world feels complex, no clear answers.
Yeah, I can see that. What about postpartum women?
That's another key group. While about 17% experience clinical postpartum depression, Keys found around 40% fall into languishing. Low confidence, worries about childcare, maybe feeling a weak maternal identity, just a lack of satisfaction.
And just general adult life pressures.
Yeah.
Busyness, money worries, or even feeling directionless despite having material comfort.
All of that contributes. And then later in life, things shift again. Happiness often peaks around 60, 65.
The golden years.
Supposedly. But by 75, problems often return. Physical decline, social isolation, losing friends and family. Keys mentions that people over 75 spend only about 10% of their time actually with others. It just highlights how widespread this feeling is across the whole lifespan.
So if it's this common, what's the way out? Keys doesn't just say, try to be happier, does he?
No, absolutely not. That's a crucial point. He argues that directly pursuing happiness isn't the answer to languishing. It reminds me of that quote, often linked to Thoreau.
Oh, the butterfly one.
Exactly. Happiness is like a butterfly. The more you chase it, the more it will elude you. But if you turn your attention to other things, it will come and sit softly on your shoulder.
Why is that, though? Why can't we just decide to be happy?
Because happiness, fundamentally, like our other core emotions, anger, fear, sadness, it's a means to an end, not the end itself.
A signal.
Precisely. Happiness is driven by dopamine, part of our reinforcement learning system. It's designed to be fleeting, to make you repeat actions that led to a reward. Its job is to guide behavior, not to be a permanent state.
Right, like if you felt happy all the time after eating one piece of cake, you'd never strive for anything else.
Exactly. Emotions are meant to be temporary. If they stick around too long, they become problematic. Prolonged fear becomes anxiety. Prolonged sadness becomes depression.
Prolonged happiness becomes...
mania, potentially. So trying to force yourself to hold on to happiness or desperately avoid sadness is kind of missing the point of what emotions are for.
It feels like there's a cultural difference here, too. Like, Western views often emphasize controlling emotions.
Right. Managing them, whereas many Eastern philosophies lean towards accepting emotions, letting them pass like waves. Keys definitely favors that Eastern approach. Think of emotions as natural phenomena to observe without judgment, without immediately needing to change them, like in Buddhist meditation.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Imagine a middle school kid who doesn't get invited to a birthday party. Our first instinct might be to try and cheer them up immediately, distract them.
Yeah, shield them from feeling bad.
But Keys might suggest a better approach, is guiding the child to accept that feeling left out, or lonely, or sad. Well, it's part of life. Sometimes it's temporary. And actually, it can be an opportunity to gain a bit of wisdom.
Okay, so if languishing is so persistent, it must have deeper roots than just a bad mood or chasing happiness the wrong way. What does Keys identify as the core causes?
He points very strongly to loneliness. He sees it as both the most significant cause and a key symptom.
Loneliness. And the stats back that up.
They really do. One study found 36% of people often feel lonely, and for young adults, 18 to 25, that jumps to a huge 61%.
Wow. But loneliness isn't just about being physically alone, right? Some people like solitude.
Exactly. It's not just about being alone. The painful feeling of loneliness, according to Keys, boils down to two main factors. First, the quality of your connections to others. Do you have intimate, warm, trusting relationships?
Okay, connection. And the second?
Your sense of life, meaning. Do you feel your life has purpose?
Connection and meaning. That ties back to other thinkers we've discussed, Like Adler, right. Relationships being the root of both trouble and happiness.
It connects perfectly. Keyes' research actually puts numbers on it. He found social connection explains about 14% of loneliness, but life meaning explains even more, about 25%. And together, they're the strongest predictors of who feels lonely.
So they feed each other. Good relationships build meaning, and isolation kills it.
Precisely. It's deeply interdependent. And think about how this relates back to lying flat or similar feelings. If you start seeing society as hostile or everyone as a competitor and feel you always have to be strong and guarded,
You isolate yourself.
you do. And that leads to exhaustion, a lack of meaning, and makes you incredibly vulnerable to languishing when things get tough.
So who feels lonely then? It could be someone with family, but they still feel excluded socially.
Yes. Or someone financially secure, but they lack purpose, maybe feel like nobody really depends on them.
Or someone facing setbacks without anyone seeming to care.
Exactly. These are chronic issues, deep-seated feelings, which is why languishing isn't something that just lifts overnight.
Okay, so if languishing is the problem, what's the positive opposite? What are we aiming for?
Keyes calls the opposite state flourishing. Think of a plant that's thriving, full of vitality, positive energy, growing. That's flourishing.
Flourishing, I like that. It reminds me of those old philosophical debates like Epicurus focusing on feeling good
Hedonia, yeah. Emotional well-being from pleasure.
versus Aristotle, who talked about eudaimonia, flourishing through functioning well.
Right. For Aristotle, it wasn't just about feeling happy. It was about personal growth, self-awareness, discipline, freedom, valuing yourself, and being connected to your community. Emotional pleasure was just a nice side effect, not the main goal.
So how does Keyes bring those together?
He synthesizes them. For Keyes, flourishing equals emotional well-being plus psychological well-being plus social well-being. He really emphasizes those last two, the functioning well and connecting well aspects.
And he breaks down how to achieve that. What are the pillars of flourishing?
He outlines 6 core domains. First is acceptance of yourself and others, including flaws.
Okay.
Second, autonomy, thinking for yourself, not just being swayed by others. Third, connection, really being part of a community, having warm, trusting relationships.
Makes sense. What else?
Fourth, competence, feeling you can manage your life and understand the world around you. Fifth, mastery, having that inner drive to learn and grow.
And the last one?
Finally, mattering. This is huge for Keyes. Believing that you actually contribute something to society, that you're important to the world.
Acceptance, autonomy, connection, competence, mastery, mattering. Okay. So how do we get there? This sounds great, but how?
Well, this leads to what might be Keyes' most significant discovery, a real paradigm shift. He argues that mental illness and mental health are 2 completely different dimensions.
Different dimensions. How does that work?
Imagine a graph. The horizontal x-axis represents mental illness, going from severe on one end to none on the other.
Okay.
The vertical y-axis represents mental health, going from languishing at the bottom to flourishing at the top.
Got it. 2 separate axes.
Exactly. And what this shows is profound. You can have no diagnosable mental illness be way over on the none end of the x-axis, but still be low on the y-axis, stuck in languishing.
So absence of illness doesn't automatically mean health.
Precisely. And conversely, someone can have a mental illness or a serious physical disability, think Stephen Hawking, or the singer Zhang Zihua, but still be high on the y-axis. They can be flourishing. Their lives can be full of vitality and connection despite their challenges.
Wow, so health isn't just the absence of disease.
It's the possession of well-being, of flourishing. That's Keyes' point.
This completely changes how we should think about mental health treatment, doesn't it?
It really does. If you look at our current state, most psychological treatments mainly provide relief. They don't often cure the underlying issue.
And many drugs were found by accident.
Often, yeah. Like a drug for TD happened to affect mood. We target symptoms like low serotonin for depression, but we still don't fully grasp the root cause of depression itself. Thomas Insel, former head of the NIMH, said back in 2006 that basically all our current treatments only offer relief.
And some drugs just kind of numb everything, not just the bad feelings.
That can be a side effect, yes. Numbing all emotions. It's a bit like some sleep aids that just knock you out rather than promoting real restorative sleep. And the effectiveness numbers for antidepressants are sobering, maybe 25% from the drug itself, 50% placebo, 25% natural recovery.
Meanwhile, the burden of mental illness is actually increasing.
It is. If you look at Daly's disability-adjusted life, years depression now causes more lost years of healthy life than heart disease or cancer, and it's hitting people earlier with high rates of recurrence.
So just focusing on curing the disease feels
Right.
like, well, like an unsolvable problem if that's our only approach.
Exactly. Which brings us back to Keyes's brilliant idea, the dimensional upgrade.
Dimensional upgrade, explain that.
It's about changing your perspective, shifting your focus, looking at a problem from a completely different angle, a higher dimension, if you will.
Like the kid struggling with grades.
Perfect example. If you only focus on academics, one dimension, it might seem hopeless. But if you upgrade your dimension, you might see they have amazing talent in sports or art or connecting with people. Developing that dimension makes the academic struggle less defining, less all-consuming.
So it's about finding other areas of strength and meaning.
Yes. We see it in other areas, too. Chronically stressed mothers who cope better if they view stress as a challenge and build strong social support. Alzheimer's patients with higher education levels often maintain function longer. Their brains have more cognitive reserve, another dimension of strength, despite the underlying disease.
Stroke patients rewiring their brains.
Another great example. They develop new pathways despite the damage. The core idea is captured in the phrase, "If you are strong, you cannot mind being sick." It's about proactively building your health, the salutogenic approach, not just fighting your illness, the pathogenic approach.
Okay, so this dimensional upgrade is the key. How does Keyes suggest we achieve it? What are the practical pathways from languishing to flourishing?
He identifies 5 key pathways. The first one is learning new things.
Learning. Okay, that seems straightforward, but how does it help us flourish?
Well, Keyes emphasizes it's not just about learning techniques or facts, it's about the attitude towards learning. Many people, he argues, have lost their natural curiosity, often because learning became about external pressures, like exams.
Right, learning for the test, not for the joy of it.
Exactly. Real motivating learning happens when it connects to the question of who you are.
That sounds like James Clear's Atomic Habits,
Yeah.
the power of identity.
Yeah.
You don't just want to do something, you want to become someone.
Precisely. Like the 50-year-old woman Keyes mentions who started learning the violin. It wasn't just about playing notes, it was about becoming a violinist. That identity shift made her feel younger, more vital.
So learning needs to connect to our story of ourselves.
Yes. What Keyes, drawing on psychologist Dan McAdams, calls the narrative self. This is the evolving story we tell ourselves about who we are, based on our experiences and insights. It shapes our meaning and influences our decisions. If learning fits into and expands that narrative, we're motivated. If it feels irrelevant to our story, we're indifferent.
But can't this narrative self also get in the way of learning?
Absolutely. 2 main ways. First, self-consistency. Our narrative likes to stay stable. If you see yourself as a tech person, embracing a product mindset might feel like a threat or an insult to your identity.
You resist it because it doesn't fit the story.
Right. Second, self-enhancement. Our narrative wants to protect our positive self-image, so we might blame external factors for failures instead of learning from our mistakes. Think of doctors reluctant to admit errors due to fear of looking incompetent. That's ego getting in the way of growth.
So if our own story can block us, how do we change or expand it? Does it just take willpower?
Keyes argues it's often not about willpower alone. The most powerful catalyst for changing your narrative is often adversity. Stressors.
Adversity. That seems counterintuitive.
Think of it this way. Adversity can be a hint from life that your old story isn't quite working anymore. It forces you to reevaluate. He tells the story of a dance student whose career ended due to illness. She languished. But then, an unexpected encounter with law sparked a new interest, a new narrative. She became a law professor.
So adversity forced her to rewrite her story.
Exactly. True growth often means adjusting your goals, making your self-story more complex and nuanced, not just trying to be faster, higher, stronger within the old framework.
Is there an optimal amount of stress then? Too much is bad, obviously.
Right, but Keyes points out that too little stress is also bad. People with 0 significant stressors often report lower life satisfaction. Those with moderate levels of stress actually report the highest. Too little challenge leads to stagnation, to languishing.
Okay, so some challenge is good, but what really matters is how we see that challenge.
That is absolutely crucial. Keyes highlights research showing that if you believe stress is harmful to your health, it will be more harmful, linked to a 43% higher risk of premature death in one study.
Wow.
But if you believe you are strong and that stress won't necessarily harm you, maybe even seeing it as a challenge, your risk decreases by 17%. Your mindset, your psychology can literally impact your lifespan. Now, this applies to manageable adversity, obviously, not severe trauma.
So the best approach when facing difficulties isn't fear, but curiosity.
Curiosity, yes. Treat life like an adventure, obstacles like levels in a game. Embrace the changes, the need for new plans, new skills, new connections that challenges bring.
And you don't have to wait for bad things to happen to grow your narrative.
Not at all. You can proactively choose role models, consciously decide who do I want to become, and actively work on developing your narrative self in that direction.
It's like those richer stories, the complex hero's journey, where the hero changes internally through the struggle. They become a hero by changing themselves first.
Exactly. That's real growth.
Okay, so learning connected to identity is the first pathway. What's the second?
The second pathway is building warm and trusting relationships. Connection.
We touched on this with loneliness. How does Keyes frame it as a pathway to flourishing?
He makes it very central, and he frames it powerfully with that question we discussed. Do you matter to others?
Right, those 5 questions. Are people dependent on you? Do they listen? Pay attention? Are you important in their lives? Would you be missed?
Answering yes to those indicates strong social connection and belonging, and that sense of mattering directly boosts your psychological and physical health.
Keyes' own story really drives this home, doesn't it? Feeling like he didn't belong until that professor saw him.
Yes, that moment I saw myself in you gave him a sense of identity and belonging he desperately needed. Bridging the gap between his past and his academic future, it was transformative.
And who tends to feel like they matter most, or least?
Generally, children often feel they matter immensely within their family, and middle-aged adults often feel important as providers, pillars of the community. Often young adults just starting out, no longer the center of attention like they might have been at home. And retirees who might suddenly feel they aren't contributing in the same way.
And if you feel like you don't matter, it can become a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Very much so. If you internalize signals from a young age that you're unimportant, your self-narrative gets distorted. You feel lonely, see yourself as an outsider, maybe misinterpret neutral interactions negatively. This often leads to self-exclusion, which just deepens the loneliness. It's a vicious cycle.
So how do we break that cycle? How do we build that sense of belonging and mattering?
Keyes suggests 2 crucial conditions for truly integrating into a group. First, a fundamental belief in equality. Inequality, whether based on status, race, gender, whatever, obstructs genuine belonging.
Everyone needs to feel they're on the same level.
Yes. Second, you need to feel you have influence or make a contribution. Others need to rely on you in some way.
This connects to that supply-side thinking you mentioned.
Exactly. Proactively offering help, contributing without waiting to be asked. Don't ask if you can help clear the table, just start doing it. People often appreciate someone taking the initiative.
And the most direct way to build belonging is
making friends. But Keyes is careful to distinguish between casual friends or acquaintances and true friendship.
What's the difference for him?
True friendship, like C.S. Lewis described it, is rarer, deeper. It provides unconditional support, inspires vitality. It's characterized by reciprocity, a free give and take, no keeping score.
And being able to handle conflict.
Yes, a willingness to sympathize, understand, cooperate, and compromise, even when things get tough. It's a comfortable space where you can be vulnerable, show your weaknesses without fear.
Does friendship require shared hobbies?
Not necessarily. Equality is the key factor. In fact, befriending people different from you offers valuable, diverse perspectives. But it does take proactive effort. You have to put yourself out there, maybe volunteer, join a group.
So the core message is, feeling important to others is vital, and it's built on equality, contributing, and making real friends.
That's the heart of it.
Thinking back to Keyes and his professor, that I saw myself in you moment is so powerful. And then years later, Keyes telling him, you are on my wall, and the professor replying, you are on my wall too. That mutual recognition.
It's beautiful. It shows the ultimate contribution, perhaps, is helping someone else feel they belong, feel that they matter.
Truly powerful. Yeah. Okay, pathway 3.
The third pathway Keyes discusses is cultivating a spiritual life.
Spiritual life. Does that mean religion?
Not necessarily formal religion, though it can include it. It refers more broadly to spiritual practice aimed at connecting with something beyond the everyday, reaching a higher spiritual plane.
So, if the last pathway was about connecting horizontally with society, achieving social mattering, this is more vertical, connecting with something bigger.
Exactly. Achieving what you might call cosmic mattering. It reminds me of Einstein talking about the cosmological perspective, realizing you're part of a vast, interconnected whole brings a kind of inner peace.
For religious people, that something bigger is God or the divine. How does it work otherwise?
Well, the concept is powerful even metaphorically. Keyes himself draws influence from Buddhism and has practiced yoga for years. His framework suggests moving from inner peace towards developing what he terms a godlike character, meaning embodying higher virtues.
So how do people practice this? Organized religion is one way.
Yes, and research does show that people for whom religion is important tend to report higher levels of flourishing. Religious practices often focus on cultivating virtues, reducing ego, finding meaning in suffering. It's interesting to contrast richer nations, often high on life satisfaction but lower on meaning, with poorer nations where religion is often more central, leading to lower satisfaction but higher meaning.
Are there non-organized forms too?
Definitely. Things like ancestral veneration in some cultures, or efforts to preserve indigenous languages and traditions, can provide that deep sense of connection to something larger than oneself, fostering meaning.
How does Keyes break down the practice itself? What are the steps or layers?
He outlines 3 layers. The first is acceptance for serenity.
Acceptance again. First of self.
Yes, accepting your flaws, your difficult emotions, practicing self-compassion. But then, crucially, accepting what happens around you. This is quite stoic. Control your responses, accept what you can't control.
Like the crying baby on the plane or the boss changing the report.
Exactly. You can't control those things, but you can control how you react, choosing to align your response with your deeper values like kindness or patience. It's similar to acceptance and commitment therapy or ACT. Receive the situation, neutralize your reactive impulse, and respond from your core values.
Okay, acceptance is layer 1, layer 2.
Layer 2 is meditation for moderation, or achieving a state of balance, zhang-yang in Chinese philosophy.
Controlling emotions, not being controlled by them.
Precisely. Mindfulness practices, like focusing on the breath, help you observe thoughts and emotions as they pass without getting swept away. This builds emotional leadership. It also involves training your attention, what Buddhists call right attention or mindfulness. Choosing where to focus.
Like focusing on a friendly smile instead of dwelling on the cold coffee.
Exactly. Training your mind. And this leads to the idea of outputting order, actively creating peace, rather than just waiting for it to happen. Think of the prayer of St. Francis, make me an instrument of thy peace. It's about turning your attention outwards, giving love, comfort, understanding without expecting return. A supply-side approach to inner peace.
And the final layer, transcendence.
Connection for transcendence, yes. Meditation is like the base camp, Keyes suggests, but the summit is transcendence.
Becoming one with that something bigger.
Yes,
Right.
dissolving the boundaries between yourself and nature, the world, the divine. It's the highest form of belonging where, as Keyes puts it, your inner God emerges.
How do you cultivate that?
One key way is through cultivating awe. Experiencing moments of grandeur, vast mountains, breathtaking music, profound art, something immense that you feel connected to, absorbing its essence, unifying with it. This active engagement with awe is far more spiritually nourishing than passive entertainment.
Acceptance, moderation, transcendence. A powerful framework. Okay, that leaves 2 more pathways. Purpose and play. These sound almost contradictory. How do you have a grand purpose and have fun?
But Keyes reveals the secret. Your life's purpose, to truly lead to flourishing, cannot ultimately be for yourself.
Not for yourself. Explain that.
To live a rich, flourishing life, Keyes writes, it cannot be lived for yourself. Think about that young scientist again.
Okay.
If they're driven purely by goals, external things like publications, funding, promotions, awards, it's like chasing a carrot. It's passive, never-ending, leads to sacrifice, constant comparison. It turns you into a kind of machine.
Right. Versus being driven by purpose.
Exactly. If the purpose is internal, like I want to explore the secrets of cancer to help humanity, then every small step contributes. A colleague's breakthrough isn't a threat. It's progress towards the shared goal. There's less anxiety, more intrinsic enjoyment.
This relates to different attitudes towards work, doesn't it?
Yes, Keyes talks about 3 levels. A Job, purely transactional for pay and benefits. A career focused on advancement, prestige, status, self-affirmation.
Now the third.
A vocation or calling. This is driven by a sense of duty, a mission, a feeling of, I must do this, otherwise the world or some part of it will suffer. These people, maybe 15–30% of the population, are often the backbone of society.
And having a vocation brings benefits.
Huge benefits. Less stress, more positive emotions, better physical health, more resilience, stronger cognitive function, even less time in hospitals when older. You know the saying, revolutionary people are always young. There's a vitality that comes with purpose.
Is this idea of a calling universal?
Keyes notes, it might be less traditionally emphasized in some cultures, where the focus might be more on, say, a passing the day mindset, contributing reliably to family, community, nation, rather than abstract causes like cancer research.
He tells a story about his student Kari, right? Choosing Buddhism over psychology.
Yes, a really telling example. Conventionally, child psychology in Ireland seemed like the better path, but she felt called to study Buddhism in India. From Keyes's perspective of personal growth and life capital, her unconventional choice, driven by an inner sense, was absolutely the right one for her.
How does that contrast with the passing the day or maybe an overly goal-focused mindset?
Well, that mindset can sometimes see the world purely as an exam system. Focus only on the difficulty and the reward. Like parents pushing kids into medicine solely for income and status, not for the desire to heal or contribute. You become a beneficiary of order, not necessarily an outputter of it.
This might explain that Asian American paradox you mentioned earlier. High achievement but low flourishing.
It's a strong possibility Keyes explores. If, from childhood, you're relentlessly driven towards narrow, concrete, externally set goals, grades, rank, specific universities, stable jobs, you might follow this path to mediocrity successfully, but lose intrinsic motivation and end up languishing. It's not about discrimination, he argues, as other groups thrive. It's about the overemphasis on these specific types of goals.
Though you also mentioned that passing the day mindset might have benefits later in life.
Yes, Keyes acknowledges that. Some retirees from cultures with that mindset seem to enjoy retirement more because their identity wasn't so tightly wound up in their specific career achievements.
Okay, so purpose beyond the self is key. What about the final pathway, play? How does that fit in, especially for adults?
Well, modern adults, Keyes observes, often fall into two traps with leisure.
What are they?
First, what you might call check-in style, performative leisure. Detailed holiday itineraries, rushing to check off sites, taking photos instead of having the experience.
Been there. And the second trap?
Passive entertainment, just zoning out, watching TV, endless scrolling on phones. No active engagement, no creativity.
So what's the value of true play?
For kids, it's absolutely fundamental for social learning. For adults, true play fosters creativity, an adventurous spirit, adaptability. Keyes laments that modern life, much like historical periods overly focused on rigid systems like exams, can become, well, boring, squeezing out the space for genuine play.
So bringing this all together, we've journeyed from understanding languishing to exploring these 5 pathways towards flourishing. Learning connected to identity, building relationships where you matter, cultivating a spiritual connection, finding purpose beyond yourself, and engaging in true play.
It's a comprehensive map away from that meh feeling towards real vitality.
As we wrap up this deep dive into Corey Keyes' languishing, it feels like the core message is hopeful. Languishing is common, yes, but flourishing is always a possible choice.
Absolutely. And perhaps the most provocative and potentially life-changing idea Keyes leaves us with is that fundamental insight. Healing illness and seeking health operate on 2 entirely separate dimensions.
That dimensional upgrade idea again.
Exactly. And think about its application beyond just mental health. Apply it to any problem in your life that feels completely stuck, unsolvable.
How so?
If you're hitting a wall, if a problem seems intractable within its current frame, Keyes suggests you don't have to keep banging your head against it. You can choose to elevate your perspective, to develop yourself in another dimension, build stronger relationships, find deeper meaning, learn a new skill, cultivate inner peace.
And by doing that, the original problem becomes less significant.
It can become irrelevant, or at least much less defining.
Definitely.
It's not about escaping the problem, but about empowering yourself, growing bigger than the problem, so it no longer holds the same power over you. You gain the strength to, in essence, ignore a problem because you have developed another dimension of your life.
You could ignore a problem because you have another dimension. That's a powerful thought to end on.
It really is.
It makes you wonder, where in your own life could you apply that dimensional upgrade? Where could shifting your focus unlock a new path forward? Something definitely worth reflecting on.